I have the great pleasure of inviting Tim Medora, our sponsor of this lovely evening, Executive Director of the Brooks Animal Rights Law and Policy Institute. Thank you for being here, Tim. The floor is yours.
I just want to tell the anecdote of how I got to know Chris and what I think of the man. So the Brooks Institute was created about 4.5 years ago through the gift of our benefactor, Brooks McCormick Jr. And about 4.5 years, like I said, we've been doing about 4.5 years as far as activity. And shortly before we even started, I got a call from some guy at Harvard Law School who wanted to come out to Illinois, a suburb of Illinois, and just sit down with me and say hi. And he said he was going to drag along one of the professors at Harvard Law School, Kristen Stilts. And so Kristen and Chris came out, and I'm just this little, if you will, sort of country lawyer. And I had these two Harvard people stop by, and I find a conference room in my building, and we just sit down. And I'm not sure what they're looking for. I was kind of thinking maybe they're going to ask for some kind of money or something, but they were just very friendly and just they talked just a little bit about the Harvard law program, and asked what the Brooks Institute might be doing in the future. And at that point, I really did not know. And they just said, if there's anything that we can do to help you give some ideas, help with connections, we'd be happy just to be a resource to you. And that was all. And so they left, and I was just sort of perplexed. Okay, that was a nice friendly visit from Harvard Law School. And so, but time is going on, and what has happened is Chris has never made an ask. He's always made offers to the Brooks Institute. Is there any way that I can help you? He's always said, give me a call. And one of the things I found about Chris Green is he tends to know everything about animal law and philosophy. He tends to know everyone in the community. And whenever I needed some insights on other programs or people or nuances, I can call Chris Green up. And the only thing I had to remember was, don't think you're going to get a 2-minute conversation with Chris, because he's just going to keep rolling on with the nuances. And so as time went on, and I got to know Chris not only as a friend, but a new colleague in work, and Kristen Stilts as a friend and a colleague at work, I realized that they ran a fantastic program at Harvard Law School. I realized that they are just quality souls and just operate with extreme integrity. And the Brooks Institute has been very cautious about grant making. We don't consider ourselves a grant maker. We consider ourselves developing programs, trying to listen intently for gaps in the animal law community and try to fill those gaps in creative and innovative ways. But one of the things that we wanted to do at some point in time was to honor our benefactor, Brooks McCormick Jr., with some kind of a naming gift. And so there came a point last summer, early summer, where I was just saying, okay, we've been around long enough. We tend to know who is who and what is what. And again, I go back to Chris has never asked us for anything. It was only offered. And so I reflected and I said, I think it's time to have a naming gift for our benefactor, Brooks McCormick Jr. And so I called up Chris and said, hey, Chris, I think Harvard and you and Kristen are the place we would like to have a naming grant. And he said, that's interesting. So Chris basically landed, as I understand, the largest animal law gift ever, which was $10 million at Harvard Law School, that went there because of Chris. Because he never asked, he only offered, he merely modeled excellence and integrity. that's how I know this man.
That was lovely, Tim. Thank you so much for being here and sponsoring this lovely event and for all that you're doing to transform the field of animal law. It's very exciting. I'm Dana Bray, a past chair of the Animal Law Committee and recipient of the award last year. It means so much to me to introduce Chris Green to you today, and it means so much to us to be a part of TIPS. I want to say thank you, John, for being here today, for your very warm welcome. Thank you, Teresa and your team. You are such lovely colleagues for us, and it's wonderful to be here, so thank you all. Giving this award to Chris is somewhat beside the point because Chris embodies excellence in advancing animal law. That is who Chris is. I just want to quickly give you a little sense, I don't have time, but a little sense of things that Chris has done in the field, and then try to share with you a little bit about who Chris is, because that's the truly inspiring part of Chris. What has Chris done in this field of animal law? So many things. And so many things that Chris has done, he has been the first to do it. So Chris is the first executive director of what is now called, as we just heard from Tim, the Brooks McCormick Jr. Animal Law and Policy Program at Harvard Law School. Under Chris's leadership, that program has received the largest ever philanthropic gift in animal law. It has expanded its course offerings, its fellowships, its scholarship, its research. There's a new animal law and policy clinic. Very exciting times under Chris's leadership. More first, when Chris was a student at Harvard Law School, he took the first animal rights law course that was offered at Harvard, and he took first prize in the very first National Animal Advocacy Competition as a student. Chris has also been a part of so much real-world change for animals. I don't have time to tell you all about this today, but he has fought against ag-gag laws all across the country. He has worked on ballot initiatives. He helped convince the largest 3 U.S. airlines to stop transporting endangered species hunting trophies. He lectures at leading law schools, at animal law conferences all over the world, consults with media. He is a true expert and a giant in our field. Another instance of Chris being there at the beginning, Chris was one of the founding vice chairs of our TIPS Animal Law Committee. He then went on to be a chair of the committee, and again, he was the first man who had ever chaired our Animal Law Committee. And even though we have been around now for 18 years, Chris is still the only man who has chaired our Animal Law Committee. So if I can politely suggest, if there's one area where you're perhaps not excellently advancing animal law enough, it's in getting more men to join you in leadership of our committee, so you can work on that. There's so many things that Chris has done. I don't want to keep you, I want to get to Chris. I want to just try to convey a little bit about who Chris is as a person. He's this extraordinary animal lawyer, but he is an extraordinary person in many other ways. He is a 4th generation University of Illinois graduate who still manages the farm that has been in his family for 180 years. Chris, unbelievably, has this other career, I don't know how he does this, in fine arts and music and film. Chris has worked for years closely with Robert Wilson, a very prominent American artist in theater and opera. Chris produces video portraiture with this famous artist. He also has managed very prominent rock bands, including Hum and Wilco, and toured with them all over the world, just incredible. He's truly a man of mystery. And I'm not making this up, but if you Google Chris Green, you can find a video of Chris escorting Lady Gaga into an art benefit. So, I'm not sure how Chris accomplishes all these things, but he does. And who is Chris in his animal law work? Chris works on very hard issues. With the Animal Law Committee, he spearheaded the resolution to try to get police training so that less frequently dogs are shot by police in front of children. It's a very hard issue that Chris has worked on. He has worked for years and years to expose the horrors of industrial animal agriculture. He has worked to shine a light inside of laboratories when the government is not protecting animals. And Chris looks at those difficult things, and Chris is anything but despairing. Chris is encouragement, Chris is energy, and Chris is kindness. He's all of those things. Chris is someone who, on an animal law and advocacy trip in China, he's lecturing at law schools, he's working on macro policy, global issues, And he stops to rescue that beautiful, fuzzy, white, smiling dog, who you may be seeing in different pictures here, to rescue her from the dog meat trade and bring her home. And she's now living her best life with Chris's parents at home with them. Her name is Lily. So Chris, he works on the big issues, but he also cares about individuals, animals, and people. And that's the last point I wanted to make. Chris he engages positively with everyone he meets, people with different viewpoints. He never misses an opportunity to help folks find their way on their paths of animal advocacy. When we collected letters of recommendation for this award for Chris, there were so many people who said things like, I'm a member of this group because Chris told me about it. I got that scholarship or grant because Chris told me about it and he helped me apply. It was Chris who recommended me. And for me, and I'm like so many others, Chris has been absolutely instrumental in my career. I would not be where I am if it were not for Chris, and I am one of many, many, many people in that category. Professor Kristen Stilts, who we heard about at Harvard Law School, she wrote beautifully in her recommendation of Chris for this award. She said, "It is no exaggeration to say that Chris has a significant hand, in fact, the most significant hand of anyone I know, in shaping the field of animal law today through human talent." In closing, I hope you agree with me that Chris actually is excellence in advancing animal law. He doesn't need this award, but I'm very happy we can give it to him. Chris is a lit doorway for all of us, for anyone who wants to learn more and do more and to stop the great wrongs that we visit upon animals. If we are all known by the tracks that we leave, Chris leaves behind him dozens and hundreds of students and lawyers and strangers who will do more to promote justice, compassion, and right outcomes than they would ever have dreamed of if they had never met Chris. So thank you, Chris, for these beautiful animal law dreams.
Yay.
Somehow apparently I have indoor allergies. I don't know what's going on. It's funny, I was just on the other side, I was just in Houston last week working with Bob Wilson setting up an exhibition, and he had this opera open at the Houston Grand Opera, sold out 3,300 people, its first big production in the US in quite a while. And the first act, there were a couple of things I noticed. I thought, oh man, Bob's going to be breathing fire when I see him. So we get up the intermission, run into him immediately in the aisle. First words out of his mouth, like, "Congratulations on your award, Chris!" All this stuff going on. The biggest days in his year, and the first thing he's thinking about is someone else, and I've really modeled myself off of him as well, and many others. But so there's a lot of people I'd like to thank. I made a small list here of folks to say thank you to, but I don't know how long we have to bring kids involved. But no, really, thank you so much. This really means the world to me. I want to really thank Lenore and her current leadership for TIPS, and Dana for nominating me, and John for, I don't know if he's still very, very good, but for just all the support that TIPS has given the Animal Law Committee. I immediately go back to think of, it was literally in 2004, I was at a place called Yale Law School, I think it's called, and there was an animal law conference, and I was in this really intense conversation with Steve Wise, and it was a pretty small community still then, and this woman who never met walks up and just starts watching us talk, and she then starts, first question to me was like, "Where did you learn to talk so fast?" I said, "Well, by singing along to Kevin Seconds and punk rock records, to be honest." But then she started being Barbara and was telling us about how she had this plan to start this animal law committee within the ABA, and that she thought TIPS was going to be the perfect home for that. And then immediately recruited Steve and I to join as some of the first vice chairs. And it was it's amazing to think 17 years later, everything that's been accomplished with, all these amazing resolutions, and that, the ABA, these resolutions they're not binding. I say that they're symbolic, but they're hugely symbolic, and they really do become the permanent policy of the overall American Bar Association to these animal protection measures. Everything from dangerous dog legislation to community cats to pets in military housing to, as you heard, dangerous wild animals and police shooting. It's really amazing, and we couldn't be happier to be part of this organization. In fact, it's funny, when I was chair and chair-elect, we'd have to go to all these meetings, and they'd tell everyone how to basically run your committee. And we were the poster child. Like every example would be of us. I felt like the nerd in class. Like, man, I'm gonna get so beat up in the playground as soon as this meeting's over. And as Dana mentioned, in a room full of people, once at a meeting in Florida, when Levy was chair, she's like, "Hey, Chris," across this, in front of everybody, like, "I wonder if you want to be chair of tips," and a couple of people, because we really should have a guy do it, and David Faber's too busy. It's like, hey, Lee, it's great to know that I'm a cosmetic diversity hire, but not only that, I'm the second choice of the cosmetic diversity hire. So, no, it was really meaningful for my time there. And I really want to thank Tim as well, and the Brooks Institute for Animal Rights Law and Policy. No other organization is doing more to further and support the advancement of animal law than the Brooks Institute, which, as we learned, is named after its founding benefactor, Brooks McCormick Jr., who was a lifelong animal lover and philanthropist. And it's not just through providing very generous financial support to each of the major animal law academic programs, but through convening the world's top experts at roundtables and retreats and working groups to just brainstorm and knock ideas around about how best to address and tackle the most important pressing issues facing the field today. One of those ideas that came out of Brooks Institute we collaborate on is the weekly Brooks Animal Law Digest, which you all should sign up for. It's a weekly compendium of everything that's happened in the field, and it's quickly become an invaluable resource to practitioners, academics, and lay people alike over the past few years, and now boasts a Canadian version. It sounds like there's some international supplements soon to come, and it now goes out every week to over 1,000 people, which, I mean, if you asked me 5 years ago if there's even 1,000 people who've heard of animal law, I'd be astounded. So this just shows you the value that the Brooks Institute, in just a short period, less than 5 years, has brought to the field. So of that long list of people to thank, first and foremost are my mom and dad, Judy and Gary, and my grandpa and grandma, John and Mary. Everything I am, I owe to them, honestly. They just showered me from day one with unconditional love and support to do whatever I wanted to do in my life. Both my parents were in the music industry, and it's the running gag among my friends that they were the only parents who would say, where the hell did we go wrong raising a lawyer? And again, from day one, just imbuing me with empathy and compassion. I still daily hear my mom's voice in my ear, pointing out, how would you feel if that was happening to you, Chrissy? What would you do if you were in their shoes? How would you make you feel? And if somebody else wasn't doing it the best, living up to some standard or doing very well, she'd always point out that, well, at least they're trying and they're doing the best with what they can. And those are two things that empathy and compassion has just guided me throughout my life. And a lot of what we deal with is really emotionally heavy, and a lot of the harms that befall animals are caused by fellow humans. And so it's easy to kind of get angry at folks, but I've always had to remember that you can't put your brain in someone else's head. You can't fault somebody else for not having the same set of experiences to come to a perspective that you now have. All you can do is try and help educate them. So let's say a couple words about some of the experiences that shaped me and got me down this path. As you heard, I manage a farm that's remained in my family for 184 years now. And as a child, there were lots of animals. We'd spend every holiday dinner there, my great-grandparents. And there were horses, and there were some dairy cows and pigs. And especially the pigs, just seeing there'd be a litter, and one would be really shy and timid, another one would be all boisterous and bonkers. And they just had this whole range of personalities and really saw them as individuals. Much like my group of friends, like, oh, that one's like this guy, that one's like this friend. And they weren't just some fungible unit, they were beings. And so to this day, and seeing the cows with these newfangled automatic milkers, even at a young age, it's like, that doesn't seem like it could be very fun for them. And so to this day, I've never drank a full glass of milk in my life, never even tasted cheese till I was about 11, and rarely ate meat. My grandpa always had to convince at the truck stops, like, no, he really does want the roast beef sandwich platter without the beef, or the roast turkey platter without the turkey, and bread and gravy all the way. That was my mantra. And because we, my mom and I didn't have a lot of money growing up, that I would take a lot of trips with my grandparents, and so he knew I really liked animals, so we would go out to visit my uncle in San Diego, and we went to the San Diego Zoo, but we also went to SeaWorld. And as heavy and meaningful as it was to be that close to this huge, majestic being, seeing Shamu, the killer whale, something seemed wrong. And seeing the dolphins being made to do all these tricks, something just didn't feel right about it. And I thought, this doesn't seem right. I hope someday I'll be able to do something about it. Another time we went to a nearby zoo in Peoria, Illinois, and there are all these like little gumball machines where you could buy these peanuts that you could feed to other animals at the petting zoo. And you kind of walk around this corner, we hear all this commotion, all this noise, and there's this gorilla. And as I recall, a pretty shallow cage, maybe only like 5 or 6 feet deep, just facing the front with this set of bars, almost like a prison cell. And there was a group of maybe 10 kids with these hands full of peanuts just whipping it and just pelting this poor gorilla. Had nowhere to hide, nowhere to protect himself. Was just losing his mind trying to escape this. And, had he been free, he would snap those kids in half like a twig within seconds. But he couldn't. He was captive. And they were all older and bigger than me, so my grandpa kind of shooed them away, which was good, but, in another hour, day, week, it's going to be happening again. And this, it just broke my heart that, this, again, just majestic, beautiful, wild animal is stuck in this crappy little cage getting pelted with peanuts in Peoria, Illinois. And again, I just thought someday I really want to do something to stop that. So I read all the James Herriot books and was convinced I was going to be a veterinarian. So the first person I'd like to thank is my high school guidance counselor, who told me I would never get good enough grades to get into vet school, so I shouldn't even try. I see her selling macrame at the county fair these days, and but honestly, I'm glad I didn't go that route, because that's what led me into wildlife biology and wildlife management, which I quickly learned was keeping other people alive, keeping other animals alive so people could shoot them, which wasn't really my scene. So I ended up getting into environmental science by accident, and was able to create Steve Schaefer as one of my administrative guardian angels, who allowed me to create my own degree program at U of I and create the first environmental science degree program. And it was really cool for my parents, because at graduation, our commencement speaker was Carl Sagan. He spent in 1990, and spent his entire talk talking about environmental issues. So it was doubly meaningful. So all my professors said, you got to go to law school to get some enforcement power, because no one's listening to us. So I did, and I did my first year. It just wasn't for me. I just thought, the practice, arguing parts per billion in some administrative law court in the bowels of Washington, to me, just didn't seem to be addressing the bigger picture. So I was getting a little freaked out, and so I basically took a leave of absence, which my grandmother, who you see here, would call a leave of senses. And I took 6 years off to go to managing rock bands. It was really fun and rewarding and lucrative. But after a while, I really felt that social tug. And so I thought really hard about what I wanted to do. And my first love was still to be a veterinarian. So I applied to vet school. I was going to go to U of I vet school. And then I got a phone call from the second major academic guardian angel in my life, which is Suzanne Richardson, who was the dean of students at Harvard Law School. And it is immensely meaningful to me that the annual staff award is still named after her. She passed away a few years ago with stomach cancer. But she calls me up and said, hey, dude, it's been 6 years. The administrative board's rolling over. This could be your window closing if you want to come back. And I was like, I hate to tell you this, but I don't think I'm coming back to law school. I'm going to go to vet school. I really want to help animals. And she's like, amazing, you should say that, because we've got this guy, Steve Wise, coming in to teach our first ever animal rights law course. Next year is literally front page news of the New York Times. Harvard was like the 5th school ever to even teach a course. So I looked into it, and it seemed pretty interesting, and Steve seemed pretty fascinating. And the vet school was like, sure, we'll hold you a spot. Go finish off law school. Why not? So I returned to law school solely to take that course with Steve, and it just totally changed the trajectory of my career. So again, Steve Wise, I really owe an immense debt. And first, I want to thank Piper Hoffman, who was a student at Harvard Law School, who graduated the year before I went back in '99, and she and several other students fought for 3 years straight to get that first animal law course taught. And unfortunately, she graduated the year before it was finally offered. But truly, had she not done that as a student to get that course offered, I would have enrolled in vet school, and instead of staying here talking today, I'd be over at Bart's staying and neutering cats and dogs right now, which I probably would be rewarding as well, but I'm very glad I didn't take that path. It just shows you, you never know what little thing you're going to do, the impact it's going to have on someone else's life. So I really owe Piper a huge step for that. And while we were taking that course with Steve, people were still like, animal what? Never heard of it. His book, Rattling the Cage, came out. And so he had Peter Singer come speak at our class, which was amazing to me. And much like Singer's Animal Liberation is sort of the foundational text of the modern animal rights law movement, I really do feel that Steve's Rattling the Cage really established animal law as a unique and distinct and valid discipline all of its own. And we had a front row seat for that. The book came out, so next thing you know, he's debating animal law with Larry Tribe and Faneuil Hall, and he's all over the media. It was just amazing to have a front row seat for that. And as a result of all that attention, Bob Barker, he was seen here, gave $500,000 to make sure that animal law would always be taught at Harvard Law School in perpetuity. Set up an endowment, and he gave $1 million to 7 other law schools to do the same. And he got a lot of crap for that. He like sheltering organizations, hey, we're struggling to survive. But he said, if I gave that money to a shelter, they burn through it in a year in dog food and cat litter. Whereas if I give that to all these top law schools and guarantee that they will always do this work and have a little bit of extra money to throw some events and conferences, that's really going to push the field forward. And I talked to Bob on his birthday a few years ago, and he reiterated, he said, giving that money to the law schools was the single best idea I've ever had in my entire life. So again, true thanks to him. One of the other people we encountered in that class was David Wilson. And so we read some of his scholarship. And he was one of the first folks really to dive into farmed animal law. And he wrote some very just deeply researched and thorough, eloquent articles on that. And the McLibel case. And I thought, man, if I could write something half as good as that, that would be like a lifetime achievement. And so I then postponed my graduation date to turn my third year paper into a bigger piece of scholarship. Finished classes, went and toured with the Metallica guys for 6 months, saved enough cash. I could spend 2 years just doing nothing but thinking and writing at the Illinois Law School and Vet School. And then that got published until it got me launched in the field. But I learned that David had all this impact on the field without actually having it be his primary occupation. He was working at a big Wall Street firm. He's now the executive director of Milbank, this major Wall Street firm. But he was able to all do it on the side and still find a way to contribute. And so I kind of like the idea of keeping my passion pure and not having it constrained or incentivized by any sort of financial concerns. So I did the same, and I spent the next 10 years doing the film and fine arts work, and it was, again, very rewarding and fun and lucrative. But I just felt that I was still missing something. I went to a conference, and animal law was only getting the table scraps of my time. So the next person I'd like to thank is Ian Eltwood. He was the communications manager at Animal Legal Defense Fund, because when I went to their website to go see what other conferences were coming up, they bundled it, events and opportunities on the website. Opportunities, what are you talking about? I click on it, and it said job listings. The field was always so small that any job would just evaporate instantaneously because of word of mouth. And so there listed was this ideal job. I couldn't have structured it better, something that fit more aligned with my interests, and that was to set up the legislative department, the Animal Legal Defense Fund. So I then made the decision to pivot to doing animal law as my full-time occupation, not just something I did on the side, and I never looked back. And I thought I love that work, doing the legislative work, parachuting in and helping fight, folks on the ground fight these bills or pass them. But then Kristen Stilts was getting, she's the next person I'd like to thank. She was very comfortable and happy at Northwestern Law School, and she was getting recruited pretty heavily by Harvard for her Islamic legal studies prowess. And I just am so grateful for her confidence and her strength to really bargain hard. And she said to Dean Minow, who's the next person to thank, who really got this issue and supported us. And Kristen said, if I come to Harvard, I'm going to want to teach the animal law course. I'm going to want to make sure it's taught every year, and I want to start building and making Harvard a center for animal law. And as soon as that happened, we got back to our colleague David Wilson, and he went out and recruited Brad Goldberg, who's the next person I'd like to thank, for giving $1 million to basically build this animal law program around Kristen at Harvard. And so I was out there visiting to judge the animal law competitions, and Kristen said, kind of realizing this is a lot of work, I'm probably going to need some help with it. I'm going to hire an executive director. I said, hey, I'd be happy to, I'd be really interested in that. She's like, oh yeah, great, I'd love to get your help drafting the the job description and maybe suggesting some people might be good for it. Like, no, Kristen, like I might be interested in that. She couldn't believe I would give up what I was doing to do that. And I just thought, it's really good to have a woman in that position. And again, never look back. We have such an amazing team. We started off with just the three of us less than 7 years ago. Kristen, myself, and Delcy Winders, who went on to launch the Farm Dental Litigation Clinic at Lewis and Clark Law School, and now is starting her whole new animal law program at Vermont Law School. And now, going from those initial 3 people, we now have, this year we'll have 35 people under our umbrella. We've grown that quickly, all thanks to the support of Brad and Tim and the Brooks Institute and Straight Dog Institute and a lot of other really wonderful supporters. So the job just keeps getting better. This last semester has been my most enjoyable yet in this role, and it's all due to the amazing team we have. So I'd like to thank Kelly and Sarah, Ann and Nerva on the program side, and on the clinic side, Kathy, Kate, Kelsey, and Rebecca, just for just being such a wonderful team. And if you notice, those are all female names as well. So much as is the case with the Animal Law Committee, that every other chair than me has been a woman, same thing with our staff. Every other member of our faculty and staff at Harvard Law School is a woman, and it brings me immense pride to have built a team of such amazing, strong, effective women leaders there. And I never thought I'd be stepping foot in Boston again, and now it's going to be hard to get me to leave. I really appreciate that. So closing the loop, being able to do this work full time now. In 2005, I got a call from Steve Weiss. He's like, "Hey, I want your advice and some assistance with something if you don't mind." I'm like, "Sure, what do you need from me? I'm still this guy who just got out of law school." And he sent me his first draft of his new idea he had about applying habeas corpus to try and achieve non-human primate personhood. And I think I sent him back 42 pages of notes on his 26-page draft. And he's like, "Holy cow, you're pretty deep into this. Let's collaborate." So I spent the next few months helping him draft this big article that became the first published scholarship on this idea of primate personhood, and it formed the basis for what is now the Non-Human Rights Project, which is our filing lawsuits trying to protect primates and elephants through attaining personhood. And our program recently collaborated with NHRP to submit an amicus brief to the Ecuadorian Constitutional Court. So Ecuador was the first nation in the world that included the rights of nature as part of its constitution. And so we submitted an amicus brief that we just learned, the judges actually contacted us and said on the basis of that, for the first time ever, they determined that the rights of nature extends to non-human animals. And so this was all based for a woolly monkey named Estrelita. So it took a while, 40 years later, but I felt like I finally was able to play a part in helping advance the cause and preventing other gorillas from being in that situation. Similarly, my very last thing I worked on at AODF, when I'm literally driving from California to Cambridge in a big old U-Haul, I get a call, and SeaWorld had applied for a building permit with the California Coastal Commission to expand. And most of the other animal protection groups had already come out in opposition, like, we want less SeaWorld, not more SeaWorld. And SeaWorld was pretty shrewd, so they were able to put this big ad campaign saying it's all about having bigger tanks for the orcas, and that we're the ones trying to give them more room. It's these animal rights crazies who want to keep them in the small containers. So, fine. But we got some intel back that turns out the California Coastal Commission didn't think that they had the authority to deny the permit. So all these other groups had already come out in opposition, so we jump on the phone, and over the next 2 days, I made about 1 million phone calls, and we hashed this plan where me and my organization, the Animal Legal Defense Fund, we're going to propose a middle way, where I say, okay, sure, we'll let you have the building permit on the condition that you never import another orca into SeaWorld, and you immediately stop your captive breeding program to breed more orcas in SeaWorld. And that plan was then adopted unanimously, voted unanimously by the California Coastal Commission. And after that, was having it in San Diego, SeaWorld themselves said, okay, we're going to end our captive breeding program and no more importation of orcas. So I felt I got to play an actual real hand in guaranteeing that there will never be another Shamu entering another SeaWorld in this country, and that is super rewarding. So after 40 years, I was able to come back and sort of make good on that promise I made as a child. So I'll just leave you with a couple things. Life is short. Don't postpone your passion. My only regret I have in doing this work is that I didn't turn to doing it full time sooner. Second is listen to your inner voice, as I did when I was a kid. If something seems wrong to you, it probably is. So the next question to ask is, when you do see something wrong, ask yourself what you can do about it. One person really can make a difference, as you've seen with all those other people, and each one of you really can make an impact. So sadly, as we say in this work of animal protection, there's no shortage of work. So get out there and do what you can. Thank you so much for this honor. It really means the world to me.